Welcome back everyone, Borfling here. It's only been about a week since Square dropped the news of Project Triangle Strategy on us at the last Nintendo Direct, but it looks like they're back again today at Sony's State of Play presentation. And this time they've bestowed upon us a bevy of Final Fantasy VII related announcements. There were the much anticipated PS5 updates for the Final Fantasy VII Remake, as well as a new DLC story campaign featuring Yuffie. And as cool as all that is, what I want to talk about today is one of the two new Final Fantasy games that were announced. And sorry Battle Royale fans, but I'm not going to be talking about the First Soldier today. I think there was some interesting stuff going on with that game, so if you do want me to talk about it in the future, let me know down in the comments below. Now what really piqued my interest today was Final Fantasy VII Ever Crisis. It's an episodic single-player RPG for mobile devices that will cover the entirety of the original Final Fantasy VII and all the compilation titles. That includes Crisis Core, Advent Children, Dirge of Cerberus, and Before Crisis. It's too soon to say, but this might actually be a truer remake than the Final Fantasy VII Remake we got for the PS4 last year. And before I unpack that statement a bit more, I do want to give a quick spoiler warning. If you haven't played the FF7 Remake and don't want some of its most important details spoiled for you, then go ahead and skip to the next chapter of this video. Alright, so if you're like me and everyone else on the internet, the ending of the FF7 Remake probably left you with a lot of questions. And while we're all waiting patiently for Part 2 to come out and confirm or squash some of the wild speculation around the story, one thing is pretty clear: this was not a straight remake. All gameplay changes aside, the climax of the narrative has our heroes destroying fate itself, seemingly releasing them from a destiny that always ends with Aerith dying, Sephiroth being defeated, and a meteor crashing down onto Midgar. I see this game as more of a pseudo-sequel than a remake, and that's why I think that Ever Crisis may be the real remake many of us have been waiting for. So far, all we have is a short 2-minute teaser trailer worth of information, but let's take a look and see what details we can pick out. Right off the bat, the trailer points out that the game has a nostalgic visual twist. The characters in the overworld are a pretty faithful up-res of their old low-poly PS1 selves. Unlike the PS4 remake, these guys maintain their exaggerated proportions. And the environments are pretty similar to the pre-rendered backgrounds of the original, and it looks like we might be going back to the static camera angles of the PS1 as well. There wasn't any voice acting featured in the trailer, but we do get these cool illustrated portraits during dialogue. They don't show up every time a character speaks, so they might be reserved for more important story moments or maybe just longer conversations. Next up, we have some battle footage, and just like in the first game, here the character models take on a different look, and everything shown during this fight looks really similar to the PS4 remake, which makes perfect sense. They already have these nicely designed high-res characters, so why not use them and keep things consistent? If we back up a second and pause here, we'll get a glimpse at the new battle mechanics. It appears we might be going back to the traditional JRPG setup of good guys and bad guys lining up and waiting for their turn to attack, and for me personally, I couldn't be happier. I love old school turn-based RPGs, so I'm happy to see it making a comeback in Ever Crisis. But things aren't exactly like we remember. There seems to be quite a few changes here. Let's take a closer look at the UI. First, we have our party's portraits and HP and MP bars, and next to that we have these two new ability boxes. Now I'm just speculating, but maybe these could be used to quickly queue up abilities for those characters while they're waiting for their turn. Now if you look down here at the bottom of the screen, we have our active character and a lot of new stuff to talk about. First, let's take a look at this blue meter. Now in the original game, you had to wait for your character's ATB meter to max out before they could attack, but here we can see Cloud attacking even while the bar is still moving. So it looks like this might not be as turn-based as I originally thought. You can also see that each ability at the bottom appears to have a cost of 1 or 2 blue rectangles, and if we slow things down a bit, we can see that when Cloud uses an ability, it consumes a corresponding amount of bars from the blue meter. You might also notice that Cloud uses multiple abilities back to back. Unlike the original game, which had us waiting around to use a single action, this game is a bit more flexible, allowing multiple actions to be taken before the character's ATB bar is depleted. It's a pretty interesting hybrid of a turn-based and real-time combat system. The video also shows the player controlling different characters and swapping between them pretty seamlessly. So it's safe to assume that we'll be swapping back and forth between characters while they wait for their ATB meter to recharge. And there's one more thing I wanted to point out about the combat before we move on. As you can see here, Cloud has some abilities that didn't exist in the PS1 game. In addition to that, these first two abilities have these weird little symbols down in the bottom left corner. And in this next shot, you can see what looks like a red timer on the top of the screen and a couple of numbers and these symbols again. My best guess is that these are some kind of touch patterns or gestures you have to make to successfully pull off some kind of attack. Being that this is a mobile game, that does seem pretty likely, so we might have to be frantically drawing some obscure shapes to unleash these more powerful moves. And finally, we have this thing down here in the bottom right, and I have no clue what this is. I mean, your guess is as good as mine. It's not quite the one-to-one remake of the original gameplay I was hoping for, and it's a little strange to think that we now have 3 different versions of Final Fantasy VII to play, and all with different combat systems, but I do think it actually looks pretty fun. Next up in the video, we get a montage of some summons and limit breaks, and then a little sneak peek of the opening sequence to Crisis Core. Now, we already know that this game is going to be broken up into different chapters, but I have to wonder exactly how many chapters are there going to be? Is each game going to be its own chapter, or is each game going to be broken up into multiple chapters? And more importantly, will each game have a consistent combat system, or will each one pull from their respective title's combat design? And finally, will we have a materia system like the one from the original game? While the PS4 remake did scratch that itch a little bit for me, it didn't have quite as much customization and emergent possibilities as the PS1 title that came before it. As of today, we don't have answers to any of these questions, so we're just gonna have to wait and see. Alright, that's gonna be it for me. What did you think of all the announcements today, and does Ever Crisis look like something you're gonna wanna play? Let me know in the comments down below. And as always, if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and hit that subscribe button. It'll really help out the channel. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.